Uh-huh. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sarah Trahone from Nutrition Support, and today I'm going to be covering our HACCP training. I'll go through the presentation, and then when I'm done, I will pull up our prototype HACCP plan that is available under the resources section on the CNP website. So what is HACCP? HACCP stands for Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. Okay, I can't get it to swap. Serving safe food is a critical responsibility for all food service operations. Each year, 1 in 6 Americans contract a foodborne illness, which translates into approximately 48 million people being sick. Of those, 128,000 are hospitalized, and there are 3,000 deaths each year due to foodborne illness. So consider the possibilities of what could happen. You may have heard about the lawsuits against Chili's restaurant, where hundreds of people were sickened as a result of a salmonella outbreak that was linked to fecal oral contamination of multiple food items sold there. 29 workers and 276 patrons suffered stomach ailments and flu-like symptoms after eating or working at the restaurant. One of the lawsuits was filed by a 27-year-old Lake Bluff resident who was a medical student at the Chicago Medical School. The manager of the restaurant was named in the lawsuit because the health department determined that the outbreak was the result of poor judgment on the part of the manager. The manager made the decision to continue operating the restaurant despite not having hot water for one day and no water for part of the second day. The medical student became seriously ill as a result of salmonella poisoning, forcing her to be hospitalized and to seek emergency care. It also forced her to miss exams and fall so far behind in her studies that as a result, she will have to retake classes before being allowed to continue with her medical school curriculum. The student also incurred big medical bills that as a student, she could not afford to pay. Chili's was asked to cover the bills until a settlement could be reached, but this request was met with silence. Results of this class action lawsuit were that the company reached a settlement with nearly 50 diners sickened with salmonella. The terms were confidential, but the law firm representing the plaintiffs reported that it was the best settlement ever obtained in a salmonella case. Originally, the firm filed lawsuits on behalf of 7 plaintiffs, but it represented a total of 49 in the settlement agreement. That included an additional 42 victims who would have been potential members of a class action lawsuit the law firm was pursuing. All of the suits will be dropped as a result of the agreement. So just think about how that could play in part of your school operations. All schools must have a written food safety plan and standard operating procedures. Specific hazards are controlled by identifying critical control points, and all potential hazards need an SOP and CCP. Schools must implement these measures in order to control the hazards. So the elements of your HACCP plan should first start with the menu items in the HACCP category, which are those foods that could possibly cause a foodborne illness. You need to then document the critical control points of the food production, how you're going to monitor the temperatures to keep the food safe, establish and document a corrective action if those foods do fall out of safe temperatures. You need to maintain record keeping and review and revise your HACCP plan as needed. The main causes of foodborne illness are time and temperature abuse, cross-contamination, and poor personal hygiene. And the next few slides are going to cover these different topics. Avoiding time and temperature abuse. Time and temperature control should have procedures in place to limit the time food spends in the temperature danger zone, which is 41 to 135 degrees. This may mean limiting the amount of food that can be prepped at one time. The next step to avoid time and temperature abuse is monitoring. Staff need to learn which food items should be checked, how often, and by whom. Assign duties to food handlers in each area, and make sure they understand what to do, how to do it, and why it's important. Make sure that the right kinds of thermometers are available. Food handlers should have their own thermometers. Have them use timers in prep areas to check how long the food is in the temperature danger zone. Have food handlers record time and temperatures regularly. Make sure they write down when the temperatures were taken, print simple forms for recording the information, and post them next to the equipment. And lastly, make sure food handlers know what to do when time and temperature standards are not met. For example, if soup on a steam table falls below 135 degrees after 2 hours, you should heat it to the correct temperature. The temperature of food must be controlled during the entire flow of food. Proper procedures should be used and temperatures should be monitored and controlled during receiving, storage, thawing, cooking, holding, cooling, and reheating. When receiving food, check delivery vehicles to make sure they are clean and have proper temperature control. Inspect food items to make sure they are received at the proper temperature. Check the dates of perishable foods. Anything that's expired, don't accept it. Mark the date of arrival and maintain a receiving log where temperatures have been checked. When storing food, frozen food must be kept at 0 degrees or colder. All floors and walls of your freezer should be clean and dry. When storing in the refrigerator must be kept at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. Air temperature should be 39 degrees Fahrenheit or colder. And in dry storage, the temperature must be kept between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Food should be stored at least 6 inches from the floor, and it should be kept clean and dry. Storing foods using the first in, first out method ensures proper rotation of food in storage. The oldest food is stored in front and the newest in back. Expired foods must be discarded. Improper thawing provides an opportunity for bacteria to grow and possibly produce toxins. Potentially hazardous food must be thawed by one of 4 methods: under refrigeration at 41 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, under running water that is 70 degrees Fahrenheit or colder, as part of the cooking process, or in the microwave if it will be cooked immediately after thawing. The preferred method of thawing is under refrigeration because the food stays out of the temperature danger zone, therefore limiting foodborne illness. When cooking food, use the process approach. Menu items should be assigned to one of the 3 processes. This can be done by writing the process number on the recipe or developing a list of menu items in each of the processes. Some menu items may not appear to fit in any of these processes. Cold items such as salad bar items, fresh fruits and vegetables should be treated as process number 1, where the menu item does not go completely through the danger zone in either direction. Process number 2 should be used for same-day service. The menu item takes 1 complete trip through the danger zone, going up during cooking, and is served. And process number 3 is for complex food preparation. The menu item goes through both heating and cooling, taking 2 or more complete trips through the danger zone. And again, the danger zone is 41 to 135 degrees. This recipe here is an example that shows the documentation of the correct cooking process. This recipe states that it would follow process 2, same-day service. It could also follow process 3, as leftovers may be utilized on another day. So after being cooked and served, it is also cooled, stored, and used again. So what is the difference between a critical control point and a critical limit? A critical control point is where a step can be taken to prevent, eliminate, or reduce a food safety hazard to an acceptable level. Critical limits are the boundaries of time and/or temperature that must be achieved or maintained to control food safety hazards. When critical limits are not met, the food may not be safe to consume. Temperature rules. The proper cooking temperature needs to be written into recipes and standard operating procedures. As you can see from the chart, poultry and stuffed meat must be cooked to 165 degrees for 15 seconds. Ground meats and injected meats, along with eggs that will be hot held, must be cooked to 155 degrees for 15 seconds. Seafood, steaks, and chops and eggs that will be served immediately must be cooked for 145 degrees for 15 seconds. And roast pork, beef, veal, and lamb must be cooked to 145 degrees for at least 4 minutes. So let's make sure we understand what critical control points are. There are 3 different critical control points in this particular menu item, which is chicken Alfredo with a twist. First is holding of the pasta while the other part of the recipe is being prepared. The temperature of the pasta must be held at 135 degrees or higher. Second is the heating of chicken and other ingredients. The chicken must be heated to at least 165 degrees or higher for 15 seconds. And third is the holding of the completed menu item, which must be held at 135 degrees or greater. A critical control point could be added for cooling and reheating if necessary. Holding temperatures. Cold foods must be held at 41 degrees or colder, and hot foods must be held at 135 degrees or higher. To prevent growth and multiplication of spore-forming microorganisms, food should be cooled rapidly after cooking. Inadequate cooling can result in spores that can germinate and multiply to hazardous levels. The flow listed here is a good rule to follow. Cool foods from 135 degrees to 70 degrees within 2 hours. Continue cooling the same food from 70 to 41 degrees within an additional 4 hours, leaving your total cooling time of 6 hours. There are several safe cooling methods that can help you achieve proper temperature control when cooling foods. The first option is to place food in shallow pans or separate into smaller, thinner portions and put it into the refrigerator. The second would be to use a rapid cooling equipment such as a blast chiller. You may have to stir the food in the pans during the cooling process to ensure that the temperature is distributed evenly and to help the cooling process along. Place a container of hot food in an ice bath and stir. Add ice as an ingredient. This is a great method when cooling soups and gumbos. And stir hot food with a cooling paddle. Cooked food and ready-to-eat food held longer than 24 hours must be labeled and dated. When reheating food, you need to reheat all potentially hazardous food that is cooked and cooled to at least 165 degrees for 15 seconds. When reheating in a microwave for hot holding, you need to reheat to at least 165 degrees. The total time to reheat a food item must not be more than 2 hours, and you should never reheat food in a hot holding equipment pan. Make sure the food has been heated to the proper temperature of 165 degrees before putting it into the hot holding equipment. When transporting food, food containers should be insulated, should be able to hold the food at 135 degrees if hot food, or at 41 degrees or lower if cold food. Use only food grade containers. Containers should be designed so that food cannot mix, leak, or spill. And at the service site, you need to use appropriate equipment to hold food at the right temperature. In establishing your monitoring procedures, you need to consider the following 2 questions. How will you monitor critical control points and standard operating procedures? And when and how often will you monitor and who will be responsible for the monitoring. Whenever a critical limit is not met, a corrective action plan must be carried out immediately. A corrective action may be simply continuing to heat food to the required temperature. Other corrective actions may be more complicated, such as rejecting food items that were not delivered at the right temperature, or discarding food that has been held without temperature control for too long. Your food safety program must include corrective actions. Employees must know what these corrective actions are and be trained in making the right decisions. This preventative approach is the heart of HACCP. Problems will arise, but you will need to find them and correct them before they cause illness or injury. It is also important to document corrective actions when they are taken. Make sure that you have great record keeping. Maintain records of cooking, cooling, and reheating temperatures and other critical control points in the food preparation process. As a reminder, all records should be maintained for 3 years plus the current year. There should be an ongoing as well as a periodic review of the activities described in your food safety program. This step ensures that the food safety program is operating according to what is specified in each school's plan. Designated individuals, such as the manager, should periodically make observations of employees monitoring activities, calibrate equipment, temperature measuring devices, review records and actions, and discuss procedures with employees. All of these activities should take place regularly to verify that the program is addressing the food safety concerns, and if not, checking to see if it needs to be modified or improved. Review and revise your food safety program at least annually or as often as necessary to reflect any changes in your facility. These may include new equipment, new menu items, reports of illness or comments on health inspections, or other factors that indicate how well your food safety program is working. Determine who will review the current plan, when it will be done, and how it will be documented. All employees as part of your HACCP plan should be trained to calibrate a thermometer using the ice point method. To do this, use the ice water method. Fill a large glass with finely crushed ice. Add clean tap water to the top of the ice and stir well. Immerse the food thermometer stem in a minimum of 2 inches into the mixture, touching neither the sides nor the bottom of the glass. Wait a minimum of 30 seconds before adjusting. For ease in handling, place the stem of the food thermometer through the clip section of the stem sheath, and holding the sheath horizontally, lower it into the water. Without removing the stem from the ice, hold the adjusting nut under the head of the thermometer with a suitable tool and turn the head so the pointer reads 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. Cross-contamination. Cross-contamination can happen across the board. So we'll talk about the different areas. Cross-contamination can be prevented by separating raw animal foods from ready-to-eat foods. Cross-contamination may also occur when raw, unprepared vegetables contact ready-to-eat, potentially hazardous foods. Animal foods must also be separated from each other because required cooking temperatures are based on thermal destruction data and anticipated microbial load. These parameters vary with different types of raw animal foods. Food that is inadequately packaged or contained in damaged packaging could become contaminated by microbes, dust, or chemicals introduced by products or equipment stored in close proximity or by persons delivering, stocking, or opening packages or overwraps. Packaging must be appropriate for preventing the entry of microorganisms and other contaminants such as chemicals. These contaminants may be present on the outside of containers and may contaminate food if the packaging is inadequate or damaged, or when the packaging is opened. Layering food in the refrigerator is very important. Ready-to-eat food should be on the top. followed by seafood, whole cuts of beef and pork, ground meat and fish, and whole and ground poultry and eggs. You want your ready to eat foods to be on top so that the juices from all of these other products don't drip on them. When handling food, never smoke, chew gum, or eat while you're serving the food. You can drink from a covered container with a straw and store on a non-food prep surface. Personal hygiene. Employees with poor personal hygiene can contaminate food or food contact surfaces and cause illnesses. A foodborne illness can be the result if an employee does any of the following: not washing their hands properly after using the restroom or when they become contaminated, coughing or sneezing on food, touching sores, cuts, or boils, and then touching the food they are handling, or coming to work while ill. When customers get sick from food contaminated with a virus, it is usually because their food was handled by an employee who has a virus. It can be a person in your operation, an employee of the manufacturer, or anyone else with a virus who handles the food, which is why basic hand washing is extremely important. Hands are probably the most common way that pathogens are transferred to food. It is important that hand washing be done only at a properly equipped hand washing facility in order to help ensure that food employees effectively clean their hands. Hand washing facilities should be conveniently located, always accessible for hand washing, maintained so they provide proper water temperatures and pressure, and equipped with suitable hand cleansers, nail brushes, and disposable towels and waste containers or hand dryers. Warm water is more effective than cold water in removing the fatty solids encountered in kitchens. An adequate flow of warm water of 100 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter will cause soap to lather and aid in flushing soil quickly from the hands. Effective hand washing must include scrubbing, rinsing, and drying of the hands. It is also important to avoid recontaminating hands by avoiding direct hand contact with sink faucets, paper towel dispensers, and restroom door handles after the hand washing procedure. This can be accomplished by obtaining a paper towel from its dispenser before the hand washing procedure. Then after hand washing, using the paper towel to operate the hand sink faucet handles and restroom door handles. There should be no bare hand contact of ready-to-eat food. Ready-to-eat food includes cooked food, raw fruits and vegetables, baked goods, dried sausages, canned food, snack foods, and beverages. Changing single-use gloves is very important. Gloves used in touching ready-to-eat food are defined as a utensil and must meet requirements related to utensil construction, good repair, cleaning, and storage. Wear non-latex gloves. Gloves should be changed when they tear, before beginning a new task, every 4 hours when doing the same task, and after handling raw meat, fish, or poultry. Employees must wash hands and change their gloves before the beginning of food preparation, before beginning a new task, after touching equipment such as refrigerator doors or utensils that have not been cleaned and sanitized, after contacting chemicals, when interruptions in food preparation occur, such as when answering the telephone or checking in a delivery, when handling money, anytime a glove is torn, damaged, or soiled, and anytime contamination of a glove might have occurred. Fingernails. The requirement for fingernails is to be trimmed, filed, and maintained. This is designed to address both the cleanability of areas beneath the fingernails and the possibility that fingernails or pieces of the fingernails may end up in the food due to breakage. Failure to remove fecal material from beneath the fingernails after defecation can be a major source of pathogenic organisms. Ragged fingernails present cleanability concerns and may harbor pathogenic organisms. Fingernail polish and artificial fingernails can serve as physical hazards and are not allowed when working in a school food service operation. Lesions containing pus that might be on a food employee's hands, as opposed to such wounds on other parts of the body, represent a direct threat for introducing Staphylococcus aureus into food. Consequently, a double barrier is required to cover the hand and wrist lesions. Pustular lesions on the arms are less of a concern when usual food preparation practices are employed, and therefore a single barrier is allowed. However, if the food preparation practices entail contact of the exposed portion of the arm with food, a barrier equivalent to that required for the hands and wrists would be necessary. Lesions on other parts of the body need to be covered, but an impermeable bandage is not considered necessary for food safety purposes. Food service workers should be aware that hands and fingers that contact pustular lesions on other parts of the body or within the mucous membrane of the nose also pose a direct threat for introducing Staphylococcus aureus into food. If a food service worker has an infected cut and bandages it, plus puts on a glove, the worker does not have to report the infected cut to the person in charge. However, if the worker does not bandage it, reporting is required. Employee clothing can also be a source of contamination. Consumers are particularly sensitive to food contaminated by hair. Hair can be both a direct and indirect vehicle of contamination. Food employees may contaminate their hands when they touch their hair. Therefore, a hair restraint keeps dislodged hair from ending up in the food and may deter employees from touching their hair. Jewelry. Items of jewelry such as rings, bracelets, and watches may collect soil, and the construction of the jewelry may hinder the routine cleaning. As a result, the jewelry may act as a reservoir of pathogenic organisms transmissible through food. The term jewelry generally refers to the ornaments worn for a personal adornment, and medical alert bracelets do not fit this definition. However, the wearing of such bracelets carries the same potential for transmitting disease-causing organisms to food. In the case of a food worker who wears a medical information or medical alert bracelet, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has agreed that this requirement can be met through reasonable accommodation in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act by the person in charge and the employee working out acceptable alternatives to the bracelet worn at the wrist. An example would be wearing the bracelet high on the arm or secured in a manner that does not pose a risk to the food, but provides emergency medical information if needed. An additional hazard associated with jewelry is the possibility that pieces of the item or the whole item itself may fall into the food being prepared. Hard foreign objects in food may cause medical problems for consumers, such as chipped and or broken teeth and internal cuts and lesions. While the food safety requirements prohibit wearing any jewelry on the hands or forearms, except for a plain wedding band, some school districts might prohibit wearing any jewelry, including earrings and necklaces. Dirty clothing may harbor diseases that are transmissible through food. Food workers who have inadvertently touched their dirty clothing may contaminate their hands. This could result in contamination of the food being prepared. Food may also be contaminated through direct contact with dirty clothing. In addition, employees wearing dirty clothes send a negative message to consumers about the level of sanitation in the establishment. Safe use of chemicals. When using chemicals, employees must store chemicals away from food, utensils, and equipment used for food, follow the manufacturer's directions, and be careful when using chemicals while food is being prepared. All chemicals must be labeled. Separation of poisonous and toxic materials in accordance with the requirement of this section ensures that food, equipment, utensils, linen, and single-service and single-use articles are properly protected from contamination. For example, the storage of these types of materials directly above or adjacent to food could result in contamination of the food from spillage. The three most common types of sanitizers are chlorine, iodine, and quaternary ammonia compounds, or QUATs. You must use a sanitizer kit when using sanitizers. The test kit must be designed for the sanitizer you're using. The concentration decreases with the use, so it should be changed frequently. And many health departments require documentation of sanitizer in the dish machine and pot and pan sink. The sanitizer must make contact with the object for a specified amount of time to kill the microorganism. This information can be found on the label. 3-compartment sinks must be set up properly. The first sink should be to wash. Pay attention to the temperature requirement on the label of the product. The second sink should be for rinsing. This sink should be filled with clear, warm water. And the third sink should be for sanitizing. If sanitizing with chemicals, pay particular attention to the temperature requirement, as a temperature that is too high can render the chemical ineffective in sanitizing. Cleaning cloths can be the source of cross-contamination. Use clean sanitizing water free of grease and debris. Cloths must be stored in sanitizing water between uses, and do not leave these cloths on work tables. Okay, so before we get into any questions, I am going to get into the HACCP plan. Get my mouse to work. Sorry. All right. So the HACCP plan can be found on our CNP website. I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry, I had to get some assistance. So you will go to, if I can get my mouse back here, the old CNP website. Go to memos and resources, school food service, farms, and under general, school food service general, it'll be Louisiana HACCP prototype. So you should have a HACCP plan for each school facility that you have. We do like if you sign and date at the bottom, just so that we do know that it's a current one, because we do have some that aren't updated regularly, but it's all fillable. So it's wherever the highlighted portion is, that's where you'll highlight it for each facility. If all of your facilities have the same equipment, you can use the same one for each site. Just change the school name and the people in charge. But we do know that most schools have different equipment. So you'll have to, you should make one for each of your different school sites, keep it in a binder, because whenever we do go on review, we're going to ask for it. So that is the HACCP plan. Any questions today? Will you post? Yes, this will be posted on the LDOE website. I would say within the next week or so. We do usually send it the afternoon or the day after with the recording, so it should be posted. And you can print the slides from, it'll be on the Louisiana Fit Kids website through Pennington. Any other questions? All right, well, I hope everyone is having a great start to the school year. I know everyone's busy, so thank you for attending today. And tomorrow we will have another training on accommodating children with disabilities. So you can join us tomorrow at 1. Thank you.